Hi everyone and welcome back to the channel. So in today's video I'm going to share with you my approach to tackling what I think is one of the slightly more challenging and interesting aspects of miniature painting, and that is skin. Now, when you think about skin in general, there's so many different variations. Whether you're going to be painting space marines, orcs, demons, Eldar, and everything in between, the approach I'm going to show you, you can pretty much use that for all of them. So having realistic and detailed skin tones, whether they're based on real life or sort of fictional sort of skin tones, they really help your models stand out. And I just want to say there are loads of different ways to actually do this. As I mentioned, this is just the approach I like to take because I think that it helps build up those tones really nicely. So I'm going to show you 4 different examples, but basically the technique you can apply to sort of any colour palette. Just remember to look at the colours that you're using and how they're going to relate to each other, and just take your time with it. And just sort of side note, I'm going to mention the sort of paints and everything I use in this video, but I don't want you guys to get bogged down with the colours I'm using specifically, unless you guys just want to replicate what I've done. But it's more important that you just sort of look at what I'm doing, how the colours sort of complement each other and the effects you can get within your sort of palette that you're using. And just for your information as well, all these models have been primed black. So let's dive in. So with this first example, we're going to be looking at a slightly reddish skin tone. So to begin with, I'm going to be base coating all the flesh areas with a reddish purple, and I'm going to be using AK violet red. This is to provide a slightly cooler undertone that will be present throughout the recesses. So once that base coat has been applied, we want to start applying warmer tones, but avoiding those recesses with that sort of reddish purple. So we're going to begin by applying Citadel's Bugman's Glow, which is a rich, warm and earthy flesh tone. It is a medium dark hue with a slight reddish undertone, which makes it ideal for creating a natural and lifelike foundation for human or humanoid skin. So as you can see, that Bugman's Glow works really well with that sort of reddish purple base coat that I applied earlier, because it's still got that red undertone to it. However, as you can see, it still looks a bit flat, so we want to start bringing more life to that skin. And we're going to do that by applying yet another sort of brighter colour to the mix, and this is going to be Cadian Flesh Tone, again by Citadel. Now, Cadian Flesh Tone is a versatile and warm mid-tone flesh colour, and has a balanced mix of pink and beige. But we don't want to put this on directly over the previous step, as it can look quite stark. So you want to mix it with Bugman's Glow at around 1:1 and start applying it to the raised areas of the model, leaving some of that Bugman's Glow showing still. So as you can see, with that previous mix of Bugman's Glow and Cadian Flesh Tone, it started to bring more depth to that skin. But we're still going to push these highlights, so we're going to go now with just pure Cadian Flesh Tone. And as you can see, it's already starting to create a sense of depth within that skin. Okay, so now I'm going to start pushing that lighter tone even further. I'm going to be using Kislev Flesh for this, because it's got a slightly peachier pigment to it. So like in the previous steps, I'm not going to put this on straight away. I'm going to actually mix it with Cadian Flesh Tone to try and incorporate those two colours a little bit more. And again, just try to apply this to the upper facing areas of the model. And finally, we can do more of a spot highlight with pure Kislev Flesh. And remember just to apply this to the areas where the muscle's going to catch the light the most. So that's the first example done. As you can see, I think this is a pretty good example of a sort of generic reddish sort of skin tone. Right, so we're on to example number 2 now. Now this is going to be another Caucasian skin tone, but this time it's going to be slightly warmer. Strangely though, we're going to be using a dark red though for the base coat, and I'm using AK's burnt red for this. With that base coat now applied, I want to use a medium sort of brown paint with some earthy undertones to it. And for this I'm going to use AK's Tan Earth. But I'm going to mix this with the red that we used in the previous step at a 1:1 ratio and apply it to the majority of the flesh areas, just avoiding those recesses. So now we can go to pure Tan Earth and again just try to avoid those darker sort of recessed areas that have been formed by the previous steps. So as you can see, it's still quite dark and muted, so again we want to add a bit more richness to that skin. We're going to start by adding AK Dark Flesh, which is a rich deep flesh tone. I'm going to mix that with the Tan Earth at a 1:1 mix. Now that we've added the warmth, we want to add some more highlights to the skin. And again, this is just to push that sense of depth within the skin, because the last thing you want with skin is for it to look quite flat. And I'm going to do that by just applying some pure dark flesh. Now for the final highlight, I'm going to add some of that dark flesh with AK Rock Grey at, again, a 1:1 ratio. Now I use this light grey as opposed to white because I tend to find that white overly desaturates colours that you're working with, whereas the light grey is really good because it still has that little bit of richness to the colour as opposed to being completely desaturated. So now if you compare this example with the first one that we did, you can see it is much warmer. And it's actually been aided by that much warmer red that we use as the base colour. So before I go on to the next example, I just want to share something with you that I've been working on that I think you guys will find useful. And that is my miniature painting notebook. So I mean, you guys know the feeling. You've painted a unit or an element on a model that you're sort of really happy with, and a few weeks or months go by and you end up wanting to recreate what you did previously, but for the life of you can't actually remember the recipe that you used. And to be honest, it's one of the most infuriating things because you know that you can actually produce that because you've done it before. So this notebook is a place for you to jot down those recipes, and it's actually got a few other features that I thought should be put into it in order to aid our sort of painting journey. So it's got 20 recipes per notebook, 4 blank line pages dedicated to each recipe. Each recipe includes boxes to note date of creation, model type, primer and varnish used, and pages in alternating colours to ease navigating through your recipes. I also included extra features that I thought, you guys, fellow hobbyists, would find useful. That is recipe ratings, so you can give your recipe its own rating by colouring in the circles to remember your favourite creation, hobby supplies to buy, and for game days there's 2 yearly calendar pages to keep note of your upcoming events and tabletop gaming days. So if you're interested, you can find the notebook on Amazon, and every purchase goes towards funding my plastic addiction and keeping me stocked up with painting supplies. So anyway, let's get back to painting skin. Okay, so for the third example, we're going to be looking at painting a darker skin tone. So to begin, I want to mix dark brown with the black at around 1:1 ratio. So now we want to use pure grim brown, and we're going to avoid those recesses and start building up our colour values from there. In comparison to the previous 2 examples, this one's actually quite simple, and this is because we're going to be only using 2 more paints effectively. And that is Citadel's Scrag Brown and AK Grim Brown, but they're going to be mixed at different ratios, as the Scrag Brown has more orange pigment in it, which helps lighten the colour. As we did in the previous examples, we're going to focus each subsequent layer on the higher points of the flesh to emphasise where the light would hit the flesh the most. The first ratio is Scrag Brown mixed with Grim Brown at a 3:1 ratio. This is then followed by a 6:1 ratio, and then finally an 8:1 ratio for those final highlights. As you can see, this isn't a complicated recipe, and you can replace that sort of orange brown with a more reddish brown, and you will achieve a similar effect. It just depends on the look you want to go for. Now for the final example, I thought I'd show you a sort of non-human skin tone, if you know what I mean. It looks a bit unearthly. Now I did this for this particular jackal because he's monstrous when you compare him to his companions within his unit. So I thought this is a great opportunity to really emphasise the fact that he's not quite human. So for the base coat, I'm going to start with AK King Purple, which is a deep dark purple, as this provides a much colder colour for the recesses. I then go with AK Reddish Grey, which is a muted earthy tone with a subtle red warmth, which is going to act as our flesh mid-tone, and again you want to avoid those recesses. Now I want to start lightening the colour to produce that non-humanoid effect. I do this by adding AK Interior Light Green to the reddish grey at a 1:1 mix. You can start to see how the flesh is taking shape, but I still want to add more highlights to sell it. So I increase the ratio of Interior Light Green to the mix at a ratio of 4:1. I then increase this ratio of Interior Light Green to reddish grey at a 6:1 ratio, and for the final highlight I'm just going to use pure Interior Light Green. Now this is a very light colour and you don't want to overdo it because it will totally wash out your model and the sense of highlights will just disappear. So again, just reserve it for those areas where the light's going to catch it the most. As you can see, compared to the other models in the squad, he doesn't look human anyway, but using this skin tone really helps push it further and makes him look more ominous in my opinion. So there you have it, that's 4 examples of how I approach painting skin. Now, as I mentioned previously, this isn't the only way to paint skin. You can use washes, contrast paints and various other techniques to achieve different results. I find this a really interesting way to approach painting skin, as it forces you to look at your layering and colour choices, which in turn helps you as a painter. And remember, you can produce any skin colour you can imagine. Just think about your base colour and how you want to build up from it. So I'm going to show you the finished models in a reveal, because as you can probably tell from the examples we've done, the models weren't completely painted and it doesn't produce a full picture of what the model's going to look like. With the reveal, you should be able to see how it all ties together. So yeah, thank you guys for watching the video and I hope you guys found it informative and enjoyable. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you don't do so already. And yeah, don't forget about the notebook, because it was really enjoyable for me to produce and think about what you guys might find useful. So yeah, all the links will be in the description, and yeah, thanks again guys, and I'll see you in the next one.